Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Samantha Kane, and I am the CEO and founder of Impact. And we'd love to welcome you today to the Montreal International Black Film Festival. So, this is the 18th edition. It was created by Fabienne Collat Foundation and co-presented by Desjardins. The Montreal International Black Film Festival runs from September 20th to the 25th, and you can find the program and grab all your access passes and individual tickets on montrealblackfilm.com. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kaneyakake Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiohtià:ke Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations today. And today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Okay, so today's topic and today's panel, good-looking panel, is entitled Representation in the Media. Black representation has been an essential subject of discussion in the entertainment industry. Production houses are looking for more Black and diverse content, and there has been a slight increase of diversity with new shows like The Porter. Yes. But progress has been slow and long, and we are not seeing much change. So this panel will explore why it's crucial to have diversity in the media, and what the lack of it does, and how this lack impacts marginalized communities, and what strategies need to be implemented to see actual, meaningful, and lasting change on our screens. All right, so today we have the pleasure of speaking with Marsha Green, showrunner for The Porter. An accomplished executive producer writer, Marsha Green was recently the co-creator and showrunner of the Emmy-nominated series The Porter for CBC and BET+. Marsha previously served as a showrunner on Mary Kills People, co-executive produced on Coroner, and has staffed on 10 Days in the Valley, Private Eyes, and Departure. Welcome, Marsha.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next we introduce Mariah Inger. Mariah is actor, director, mentor, and chair of ACTRA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging for both Montreal and national committees. As an actor working in film, TV, voice, video games, radio, and theater, my goodness, she does it all, she's amazing. For over 30 years, Mariah has had the chance to work with some of the industry's finest, both in front of and behind the camera. Mariah is also a theater director, script consultant, creator, and a teacher in the professional theater program at Humber College. She is the VP of Black Wealth Media, a company that focuses on producing and distributing Afrocentric content for film, TV, and the web. Mariah is also the co-coordinator and mentor of Artists Membership Program, AMP, at Black Theater Workshop, mentoring emerging marginalized artists. In addition to being the chair of the National Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Mariah is an ACTRA Montreal counselor, and she's served as the vice chair of ACTRA's Montreal Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. Welcome, Mariah. So great to have you here today.
Jeez, sounds like I do everything in the world. I promise I don't. Just a lot of titles. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you all.
You do. It's great. Own it. Own it. Fantastic. Next, joining us, we have Patricia Chica. Hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Apologize if I did not. She is the award-winning producer and director. Patricia is a Latina America award-winning filmmaker who divides her time between Montreal and Los Angeles. Her production company, Flirt Films, advocates for diversity, inclusion, and authentic representation on screen and behind the camera, and since 1997. As a chai energy educator, Patricia also brings conscious practices and growth mindset into her work environments and productions. Her upcoming production, Montreal Girls, is the first film ever made with the Chai energy method that she has developed over the years and has the authentic representation of actors and languages from diverse backgrounds, including Arabs, Quebecois, and Anglos. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Wonderful to have you. And last but certainly not least, Roderick Lawrence. Roderick is an actor. He's the co-founder of Black Man Films, creator, actor, and producer of Silent Partner. Roderick is a highly acclaimed actor and the co-founder of Black Man Films. He is a 2020 Odeluc, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
Hidalgo.
Hidalgo, thank you. Nominee and the 2022 Best Actor recipient at the Oscar qualifying Bronze Lens Film Festival. Amazing. Roderick's credits include Simba in Disney's The Lion King's national tour, Ramses in the Broadway-bound The Prince of Egypt, Othello in John Leguizamo's Othello, the remix, Floyd Barton in August Wilson's Seven Guitars, and Jesus in Godspell. I love that production. During the pandemic, Roderick created, starred in, and produced the multi-award-winning narrative short Silent Partner, which is currently on the festival circuit, garnering 16 festival acceptances, 4 Oscar qualifiers, 7 awards and nominations, and is a finalist in the HBO Max Latino Short Film Competition. BM Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music. Whew. Welcome, panel. Such distinguished people. Hello, hello.
Hello.
So glad to have everyone here. Okay, so let's get into some real talk. Let's talk about proper representation in the media. Now, before we start, there was a lot of introductions there. I'd love to go around the room and just hit us with a fun fact about yourself. Let's start with Mariah.
Oh gosh, the one with all the titles. The fun fact there, I mean, I do a little bit of all of those things. Yes, all of those things are actually my titles. I'm an actor first, just to be clear. I'm an actor first, and everything else really became an importance because of being a diverse actor, being a BIPOC actor in the industry. So then it was about, I had to mentor the young, then it was about I had to change what was happening on screens, and it just grew from there. But I'm an actor first, so we'll just stay there for now.
That's wonderful. Marsha.
You know what? Today is actually Trinidad and Tobago Independence Day. So in honor of that, my fun fact is that I played steel pan for, I don't know, like 15 years in a band with my dad when I was a teenager until I was in my 20s, and he forced me to do it, but I ended up really loving it and being really grateful to have that connection to my culture. So it's my fun fact.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. You know you're going to play that for us sometime. You have to. Roderick, let's move on to you. Fun fact.
How you doing? Thank you for having me here. I'm glad that somebody made my bio sound almost as cool as any of theirs, so that's exciting. My fun fact is, so I was blessed with that award at the Bronze Lens this like 2 days ago, and the fun fact about that is I was so surprised. So one of my favorite actors was when they said like the nominee for best actors are, the first one they said was Coleman Domingo, who was one of my favorite actors. And I spent a quarter of my speech like talking about Coleman Domingo because I was that surprised. So that is my fun fact.
That is fabulous. Congratulations, by the way. Well done. And Patricia, please.
Yes, congratulations, Roderick, and everybody else. So great to be in your company. So my fun fact is that I just released my debut feature called Montreal Girls. And my intentions since the beginning, since I founded my company, Flirt Films, over 20 years ago, is to bring diversity and inclusion. Back in the day, in the late 90s, when the word diversity and inclusion weren't a thing yet, it was more about visual minorities. That's how we used to call BIPOC people, people of color. And diversity comes also in other forms than just the color of your skin, the language you speak, your gender identity, etc. I bring an extra element to my work called Qi energy. Qi means energy in Chinese, is the flow that goes through all of us, what connects us to story, to higher consciousness, and to performance. So Montreal Girls is the first feature film in history ever made with the Qi energy method that I teach, that I have developed. Cast, crew, and producers, everyone from in front and behind the cameras, were trained to use their energy as a device to expand their creativity and storytelling together. So that was my fun fact.
That is wonderful. Congratulations on developing that. I mean, that must be, I'd love to hear more about that. And we probably will talk about it a little bit more as we go on. That actually is a nice segue into why is representation in the media so important, and why is it not enough? Let's kick it off with Roderick. Let's start with you.
Cool. I will be brief because there's so many of us, and that's such a big question. It's important because it is reality, right? Like, it's important. Like, if that's the world that we live in, and the media represents like our reality, then like it's important because we need to see ourselves in stories, not only our stories, but in stories. I don't watch. I never watched the Dragons show that everybody watches on HBO, and I'm not watching the new one, even though there's a couple of Black people in it. I like. How do you like representation is important because without it, like, these people made an entire show about dragons and castles and still kept us out of it. Like their fantasy worlds don't include us. So representation is important because it's reality, and it's not enough because we're not represented.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. You know what? I didn't watch Game of Thrones either.
Yes.
So I got to get into it just like everybody did, but it was so, for me, you're absolutely right. There was no proper representation in there. So I felt like, oh, this is so superficial and artificial. Marsha, let's dig a little bit more. And congratulations on the Porter. So fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the Porter is so, it was something that I wanted to do because it was so important. And I think in terms of that show specifically, what was kind of such a joy and a privilege was to have this whole cast of characters to play with. So we weren't limited to being just the one character on the show that had to like be everything and everyone to everybody. We had this whole cast of people to play with. And so that is sadly like, a luxury. And when I was approached to do the Porter, I felt at the time that something like this might not come along again in my career. And I feel that is slowly changing, and that's encouraging, but I think there could be more. But I would say, I think why I feel personally why representation is so important is I really do think that, the adage, like, if you can see it, you can be it, is true. I feel that when people don't see the possibility, see themselves represented in all of these different careers and paths, it really limits their own ideas of what they can accomplish. And, it took me a long time to get to screenwriting. And I think that that's part of it. I didn't see anybody like me doing it. And so didn't really seem like an option. And I don't know what it was that made me feel like I could do it. But, you know, I, you know, found that within myself, but also had a ton of support and managed to kind of get, you know, make my way through. But I would, I think doing a panel like this and seeing all of the different roles that people can do is really important. I think it does inspire people and encourage them to follow their dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I applaud you on the Porter, because you know you can see that a story about and involving Black people does not necessarily always have to be where we're beat down and imprisoned and, you know, left dying in the street. So thank you for that. Now let's kind of add two questions together. So in the last 2 years, we've all seen that the growing demand for restructuring the Canadian media sector to allow all Canadians to see themselves reflected on screens has now changed. Like, you saw that big wave, that walk come through. However, let me ask you this, how does representation differ from presence? Mariah, and then Patricia.
Oh God, I get the hard one, huh? Well, I mean, obviously Patricia and Roderick spoke about, you know, just the realities of not only our stories being told and our, you know, and visibility of who we are, especially when a lot of stories are rooted in fantastical stories is one thing, right? And I don't think we can even exist in the fantastical stories if we don't even exist in the real stories. You know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I'd be on set, you know, in a film based in Chicago, and I'd be the only person of color, you know, or in Brooklyn, New York, and I'd be the only woman of color in the entire script, you know. So if we can't even base it in reality, like actual, you know, I don't care if you're white, black, green, purple writing the script. If you are writing a script that is based in downtown Toronto, downtown Montreal, downtown New York, you're going to tell me you don't see any color. So if we haven't even gotten to that, you know, there's a lot of work to be done. But so that's the representation we need visually for everyone at home who's dreaming and hoping and, you know, creating and looking for funding and seeing if it is possible to move forward in that. They need to see it on the screens. That's just the concrete proof, you know, of like, yes, we are here, we exist, we are part of. But you also have to consider what it's like to tell, let's say, a story that is written by a Black woman for a Black woman, let's say, and it's a beautifully well-crafted story, and I get that role and I go on and every single person around me is white and male and not representing whatever. It is a huge, it's very shocking, but it's the same thing for me as if we are talking about a horrifying, I don't know, I hate to say something so triggering, but like, you know, a rape victim or a rape story and a sea of men, you know, if it was a story of a woman, like we have to acknowledge that we are telling these truths and we are telling these stories, and we don't have any necessarily visual support and cultural support and, you know, actual knowledgeable support around us. I'm very happy when stories get told, and I'm very happy when writers are getting finally produced, thank God. But if the crews don't understand, if the, you know, makeup artists don't understand, if the hairdressers, costume designer, like if everyone else doesn't understand either, I'm still on my own island. I'm still creating alone. And the whole point of this is so that we can start creating together, you know? That's sort of my spiel.
Yeah, for me, I see it more from a distance. I work as a publicist as well. And what I have discovered that the intention from the government initiatives and decision makers is there to have representation, to hire people of color in front and behind the camera. But the true problem is not there. We keep blaming governments and decision makers, but the real what's at stake is the money, the profit behind content. So when people believe that it takes an A-list star to be on the poster to generate box office, for people to go buy a ticket at the cinema or click on that link on the platforms, It really comes down to one thing, and it's publicity. Because the people who back in the day could afford a publicist to become celebrities, to become influencers, to become well-known, were the people of privilege. And who are the people who have the most financial privilege? Are mostly, in general, wealthy people, people from rich families, or Caucasian people. And that's why we, in the era of sales and distribution, we want to have those names. And we have the Will Smith. They are Black people with a lot of money. They could afford publicity. So what's important is to think backwards and think, how can we give exposure to people of color, to diversity and those voices, so they can feel empowered, and the audience members, who are the consumers of the content, can really ask for that content to be available with those faces, with those voices behind it. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to make money. So we have to give the opportunities to people of color at the awareness level, so the audiences know about them, and they click on those links, they buy the tickets, and they consume the content. So I believe that that was the start of the conversation. Now we have to have representation. It's already being implemented in people's consciousness, but authentic representation is truly the key, because we can put, different characters of color, but if the people making those films or telling those stories have no clue what those realities are about, then who has the final say? Who has the ownership of the final cut? Who can speak from a true, authentic experience? And that, to me, is really the key.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I know that Hollywood just did a study that proved that they were losing like $10 billion in revenue because Black-led stories were getting told, but they were not being properly funded. They were being undervalued, so I'm wondering, with the funders now in Canada, perhaps it's time for them to step up and do that as well. Like, we have had some great success series like The Porter, Diggstown, Utopia Falls, Kim Convenience. So my question, I'm going to put this to Marsha, do you think the only way that proper, true representation can be told is through a Black voice or an Asian voice? And if it is someone from the white community telling the story, why is it that they feel that, I can't speak for everyone, but we have been told and heard that it doesn't matter who tells these stories?
I mean, I think that like, when you're a writer in the room, you write for all the characters. Like, that is the reality. You work on a show and you're writing for everybody. But it's just, we, like Black people or people of color, we exist so often in predominantly white spaces. We've had a lifetime of watching white characters on television. So I feel that our ability to move between characters is different than the ability for white people to write for characters of color, because they often are not in those worlds and don't have that. They don't know, not only do they not have the lived experience, but they're not even really necessarily being exposed to that. Certainly not on television, that's why we're all here, but also just in their own lived experience. And so I mean, never say never, but I think it's very challenging, because right now it feels like more than ever what we want is authentic storytelling. And it's very hard to have authentic storytelling when you're not a part of that community. And I think the success of, like a show like Kim's Convenience, it was like Ince created that. It came from himself and his own experience. And then of course other people wrote on the show, but at its core and at the head was a person for whom that was their lived experience. So I think there's room for everybody, but I feel that the true authentic stories it will come from the people who are of those communities, because we do branch out, but we do really write what we know. I think a lot of the times, I think that's very true. And I think that the best stories sometimes come from that. So, yeah, that's my thought.
I think that's great. Thank you. And so, right, hitting the nail on the head there. Absolutely. So let's talk about the funders and the government and how they're now committed to investing more to diverse talent, homegrown talent, both above and below the line. Many questions here, but the first one I'm going to throw towards Mariah and talk about what the impact was like for the Quebec BIPOC creators. Especially those from the Francophone community. I know that this is a very touchy, let's walk slowly here. Bringing it
very
to
complicated. It's
Yeah.
a complicated situation, in particular in Quebec, because we have so many other entities that are involved. There's a Quebec culture that they're trying to protect and save. The Quebec culture is primarily white. That's just a reality, even though there are many, many multicultures that have been intertwined over the decades. But it is primarily white, and they believe that their culture is at risk. So the fight for their own culture is always at the forefront in this industry. Which, you can have whatever opinion on that. I'm not going to comment on that. That is what it is. But in the industry as a whole, when you're trying to change the process and involve and create more diversity and create more visibility and create, more stories, Quebec, unfortunately, is one of the most behind in it, not only in Canada. I mean, North America is behind compared to other places in the world. And then, Canada is super behind in comparison to the US. And then Quebec is even more behind in compared to the rest of Canada. Because again, there's this internal, process going on, and they don't see the problem. They're talking about language, and we're talking about visibilities and cultural. And so what's often happened here is we've done stuff like, they jumped in really wanting to help and move forward and recognize that there was a problem, and they jumped in with colorblind casting. And that was like a huge issue of like, no, don't have a Quebec pure laine white story and just put in a blackface. Like that is not what we're trying to get here. That's not authentic. That's not real. It's not authentic to your Quebec true, in small town Abitibi, nor is it true to the Black, who grew up there. It's not the same. Conversations around the dinner table are not the same. Realities of when they walk down the street are not the same. So just having to try and explain those, we're not there yet, to be quite honest. We're not there yet. Quebec is far from there. And I work obviously across Canada. I'm shooting transplant right now, so I work with a lot of Ontario and all of that. And there's a lot of diversity, which is amazing. Hamza is the lead, and it's all about diversity, and it's beautiful, and it's very well written and very well respected. But it's well written because a lot of people are involved in that conversation. And in Quebec, it's still primarily, the same entity. It's the same producers, it's the same writers, it's the same creators. And to be fair to them, it's because they fought for their place in the sun, for their, industry to thrive in only the Quebec bubble. It doesn't thrive in the rest of Canada. It thrives in Quebec. So they had to kind of nourish that. But that means very little space for anyone else to enter, especially when you're talking BIPOC, and other kinds of stories. Obviously, certain cultures are very well represented here in Quebec because there's a large population of them in Montreal. But it's a very delicate. I don't think it's been well established here, to be fair. I don't think we've moved forward as far as we need to. I don't think we have achieved as much as we need to. And I think we have to be very careful when we see a few faces of color or a few, scripts written that we say, yay, the problem is not. And as we talked about earlier, like the funding's not there, the equality's not there. I'm sure you guys know, I know a million people who have self-produced or self-written, self-created because they couldn't get the funding. They did it on their own. Those credits don't count. You know, the big guns don't hire you, you know, so you end up doing it all guerrilla style and just trying to create on your own and, you know, hope that it gets recognized. So we're nowhere near where we need to be. And we have to deal with, you know, different cultures here too, that are trying to fight for their rights as well. So it's complicated. Unfortunately, I have no positive answer.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's dig in a little deeper here. You know, not that we're going to have the answers right here in this panel, but it could be a start. So, you know, there's been so much data collection. There's been reports, guidelines, protocols, such as the BSOs being seen, RESOs, diversity on screen, and of course, the Indigenous Screens Office protocols and pathways on how to properly engage with the Indigenous community, Indigenous talent, just to name a few. So I'm going to throw it out to the panel. What other actionable steps do you want to see media companies take to ensure that harmful perpetuating of stereotypes is eradicated, as much as it can be eradicated, or at least forward movement steps to it, and that it's you know, it's not just solely chosen to fill a quota, but actual proper steps are taken? Because Mariah, you touched on the fact that Band-Aid solutions have been thrown in. I mean, I've watched some movies where I'm like, I don't know if that person, you know, should be of that culture. That doesn't quite fit. I'm going to throw it out there to Roderick, and then Patricia, and then I'd love to hear from Marsha on that as well.
So I'm going to be mad negative about the whole thing as well. I think that so much of our issue is thinking that or expecting a media company or the government or any of these things are going to fix this thing with any kind of real intention. And if they don't fix it with the intention of actually making it better, then everything is Band-Aid. All of these companies hire things and put policies in place to stop them from getting sued when shit goes down. Excuse my language. When something happens, you know, like they don't care. So it's so that they're not blasted in publications, so that when people like there's no genuine need or want for us to be there and to be represented, because if there was, we would have been there. We would have been represented. So I say that to say that I think that they should continue to do those things because it gives us a couple of us jobs and, you know, whatever else. Cool. But we need to understand that they will not fix this, and that we need to fix this, and that we need to, like as you said before, I think that we do need to tell our own stories. Rom-coms and these other things, some of these, yeah, these are stories about people, and that's awesome. That's great. We make stories about our diaspora, about our experience. And you, like Denzel said, my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes, it's culture, not color. Right. So like if you don't live in that, you can't tell that story. And when you do, it becomes some like coon caricature of what we've decided, you know, what they think our experience is. So like, you know, the thing that they can keep doing that. And I hope that more programs are built for it to get better. But what we can do on our media platforms is demand a certain amount of like authenticity and excellence, because our platforms don't do that. The things that we're putting out are not doing that. We're stunt casting athletes and models to get, you know, we're not paying attention to acting. We're not paying attention to storytelling. We're putting out content because people are watching it. So we're helping their cause, which is to put us down and to demean our stories by demeaning our own stories. And like, it's like if we need to, like, we can do it all by ourselves. I'm 100% positive about it. If some help is fine. Some help is great. If you want to be an ally and you actually, and it's authentic and whatever, fine. But we can do it by ourselves. We just have to demand excellence from ourselves and not put out content because it's being watched. You know, and that's where like you say, these people pay attention to the numbers. They do, and that's when we win. That's why Nope wins. That's why Judas wins. That's why all of these things win, because of the strength of the content and the actors and the storytellers and the care of the story and the nuance in it, instead of putting out content because the numbers say people watch it. So I think they can do a bunch of great things, and I think they continue to get better through the government and through all these other things. But I would much rather bet on us than bet on somebody else doing it.
Marsha, let's throw it to you, and then Patricia.
I think I hear you, Roderick. I really do. I mean, to me, what I would say should be different, what I wish was different, is that, you know, our system in Canada is essentially that the producers for the most part, and then maybe the networks as well, obviously, kind of control the content, what gets made, how it all goes down. And so you were kind of talking about presence versus representation earlier. So what happens is that it's like they're just hiring people to do all of these things, but in their own organizations, not a lot is changing. So I would say before you're just going out, like, don't get me wrong, we need to hire more people, of course, but it's like, that's not the reason why it's kind of like, yeah, like we want to be in the position to make our own stories, but right now it's like we need to get experience. So then we have to do like this grassroots stuff. Or you could be working at a production company right now if they were interested in diversifying their staff, you know. So I do think that needs to happen more. And I would also say that I feel like there's a lot of things that what I find is that when it's like government funding or things like that, it's like, okay, here, we're going to give you money for this, but that the money isn't really going into training people to be able to have the jobs that we want to have. It's like all of the training that I see mostly comes actually from grassroots organizations. They're the ones in the communities trying to find writers, trying to find directors, trying to build them up. And often it's I feel like that's really, really important for us to be able to produce excellent work. You know, like for me, you know, in the last 2 years, of course, everybody's like, you know, knocking down my door or whatever, but it's like, because I managed to have, you know, 7 years of experience before that. You know what I mean? And I just think we really need to be invested. Right now, I think the most important thing is just to be invested in training people to be able to thrive in these roles, and hopefully be able to, yes, have more people, more BIPOC people creating content in the future.
Absolutely. Patricia?
Yes, for me, what the action steps that are very important, all this great diverse content is being produced right now, and there could be more, but whatever is being produced, I find and I observe it's not reaching out to the wider audiences. It stays marginalized because there is a lack of funding or strategies for marketing and distribution, for reaching out to the communities and the public at large. So, for example, when there is a project that is fully BIPOC, oftentimes they will distribute it targeted towards that niche audience, but it should be a wider audience. Why is white content being distributed at large, not just to white people? It should be the same for diverse content. It should be distributed to everyone, so everyone becomes aware of those different perspectives and realities, so it becomes part of the conversation at the social larger level. So I find that the governments are funding content, they're giving people opportunities, but then it doesn't reach out to a wider audience. And that's the key, because at the end of the day, we will keep producing what is becoming profitable and what's making money. So we have to keep thinking, how can this diverse content become so profitable and everybody's talking about it, so it becomes part of the spectrum of what it is to be a Canadian today. And that's really where I think we should think, we should bring the strategies and be more proactive in the industry.
You know, absolutely. And you talk about profits. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, again, I spoke earlier about, you know, Hollywood losing billions of money. You know, I think the same has to be done for Canada as well. There needs to be proper audience and community engagement so we can see that our shows are being watched, our stories. When you see yourself on screen and you can relate to that story, I think it will help push this a lot further, because you're right. There are people from the white community that are telling everyone's story. And we've seen how destructive that can be. Mariah, I'm going to give you the last say on that.
Well, I just want to make sure that we also like acknowledge that we're still giving a lot of power to others to control what our industry should be. I really do agree with Roderick in the sense of like there is this kind of like there's a fear in place. We have a system that is in place that has been created by others. And obviously it's worked for many, lots of millionaires, a lot of famous people out there, a lot of popularity, but maybe that's not our system. Maybe we need to create a different one. Maybe we need to create our own channels. Maybe we need to create, like, I just want to give us some self-love also, in the sense of, yes, there's that lane that we have to penetrate and we have to profoundly, you know, put ourselves in there and show that our work is just as, you know, just as appropriate, just as talented, just as, you know, creative, and get recognition and demand publicity, demand, you know, the funding in all the right corners. But there's also this other side that is actually way more culturally what is the word, not unique, but honest, in the sense of we do things with ourselves. We do self-create, we do self-produce, we do gather people together and move things. We move mountains together when we have to, within our own communities, with our own groups. When things come push to shove, we will make things happen. And I don't think we've encouraged ourselves in that. I don't think we've actually acknowledged how much we have accomplished in a world that has never given us a voice. So if we're able to accomplish this much in a world that's never given a voice, if we maybe stop giving, I'm not saying to let go of the energy of trying to get into that lane and get them to wake up and give us the funding and all of that, but if we just put a little more energy in the like, hey, we're actually quite capable. You know, how about we're not getting together and creating our own production houses? How come we're not getting together and creating our own, you know, our own lane in government funding or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Like, I know I'm sporadic here, but like, it's just, I think we sometimes, we keep trying to put the round peg in the square hole of the system that has already been in place that was never created for us. And I just want people to start creating ways of, yes, it would be great to break that system, make it all equal. We're all equal. Everything is amazing. But until that happens, until all the, you know, white men in power, you know, leave and think that we're amazing, we shouldn't get discouraged either. We should be empowered to work together, to enhance each other, to fight for each other, and to believe that we have our own lanes to create too. I truly believe we have our own lanes to create as well. It's a lot harder. I'm not saying that. It's a lot harder. It's a lot more tiring. It's a lot more weight on our backs. But if we had been doing that for the last 30 years, then maybe today we would have a more equalized industry and less panicked. Maybe there'd be just as much racism, prejudice, sexism. Like we know what the problems are of the human race, but maybe there would have been more Will Smiths and more Viola Davises and more, you know, maybe there would have been more of those, you know, more writers, more Marsha Greens, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe there'd be more of that because we would have continued the fight together as opposed to keep trying to break down that wall. If we had created another lane, maybe we'd have been in a different place. So I just want people to take the fight there as well.
Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that then. You talk about making space for ourselves, but here's my question to you, and it's open to everyone to answer as well. How do we do that if the barriers that have been systemically put in place how could we have done this 30 years ago?
Well, one of the things that we could have done, sorry, I'm jumping in, guys.
Oh,
One of the
please
things
do.
that we could have done is we could have mentored our people from the beginning. We could have taught them that there was a place in this industry to the beginning. All of us creators, I know that I've been in this business for 30 years. And for 20 years of that, I believed I should be grateful for the little nugget that I would get in the big, the big, huge sky of Hollywood. And, thank you so much for allowing me to participate in this industry, because no one turned around and said, hey, Mariah, you're talented. You know what? You belong here. And I understand that was the racist, prejudice, sexist world that we were in. But somehow at some point I realized I belonged. And instead of me just stomping my feet and being angry at the entire industry, I started saying, well, I'm going to start teaching the kids behind me. I'm going to start telling them that they have a place. I'm going to start talking. And I put myself in those rooms. I am in those rooms having those conversations with the big guns. I am in those rooms saying, you know what, this is actually not correct. You can be mad at me all you want, but it's not correct. Look at what's on your screen. Look at who's in this room. Look at who's writing. Look at who's producing. If we had those conversations earlier, I think we would have moved forward, but I get why we didn't. I was a victim and a perpetrator in all of that as well. But today we have the language. We have the skills, we have the language, we are in force, we actually can communicate with people worldwide. We are having panels like this on the regular with intelligent people who are like, I'm tired, I've done this, I've done that, but we're still not at the part where we all work together and support each other and move forward. So that's one of the changes we can make.
Well, I was just, Roderick, going to pass it off to you, because we've talked about scaling up and also throwing our hand down to lift up the next. Mariah, you talked about your mentoring. Patricia, you talked about your Chi Energy Educator initiative that you created. Marcia, Roderick, I'm going to throw that to you. What else can we do? Like, as a writer, a writer, director, producer that's doing their own thing, what are you doing, basically? I'm going to throw it out to you personally. What are you doing to help scale up the next, right? I mean, real truths here, real talk.
Yeah, I'm a very show me brother, and I don't hold my tongue for nobody in no rooms, and it keeps me out of a lot of rooms, but I still get jobs, fortunately. And I also created something that looked like a multi-million-dollar short when I had never created anything ever, because I demanded excellence from from my people who I knew already were capable. There are a lot of Black people in Canada with money. There are a lot of Black people in the US with money. Reach out to those people. If they want to change the things, they can give you that money, and we have the resources to make it happen. It's not hard. We just, honestly, it's difficult because, like you said, barriers, they can't do that anymore. There are speed bumps. They put speed bumps in the way, but there are no more barriers. I am going to be seen. I am going to be seen. I just have to, I just calm myself from saying certain things that I know get me in trouble in certain places, but they will hire our puppets, right? That's what because they will do what they need them to do to make us look the way that they do. If we don't get the chance that white folks get, white folks put out bad content all day, every day, and the few Oscar things are what shine, but they have so many opportunities that you're not paying attention to all the bad shit. We can't have 4 channels and all of the content be trash because it's the only thing we have. So we need to put the time and the effort and the care and the nuance into our projects to care that our stories are told beautifully and authentically, so that they shine above. I think that I was blessed with my director Aristotle Torres and my DP Eric Bronco and my co-star Carrie Young, who was just nominated for a Tony, and I surround myself with geniuses because there were more than enough. There were more than enough. It was just we demanded that this is the type of work that we will put out until we get to some equal point where Black people can put out bullshit too. Right now we're not there. So we need to, everything we put out, we need to make sure that the time and the care goes. I don't care what they're doing. I don't care what they're doing. I know when me and one of my boys got into it this past weekend, he was like, white people put out trash all the time. I was like, I know, I don't even watch the shit. I know that they do that. I don't watch it. And like, but we're putting out trash. And not only are we watching it, but they're watching our trash. So then people, Warner Brothers, all these companies see the numbers and they're like, put out more. This is working. Like we have to, like, there are, I guarantee you these black folks, oh my God, Canada got money. Like there are like, I don't have shit, but like I found people who did, and they believed in what I was doing. And now we're 18 festivals in and all this stuff from a pandemic, baby, because the show I was supposed to do was canceled, like.
So how do you pay that forward though? It worked for you. You were able to do that on your own. How do you pay that forward to the next and so on and so forth?
We have to speak authentically in these rooms without worrying about who's listening, and really push forward the craft and the art and the passion and all that stuff. And I also have to, like, my whole team was black. My entire team my entire creative team was black, and I refused to budge on having anything else. And my other team was all people of color. My co-producer's Pakistani. Like, like my entire creative team, top to bottom, was black. I didn't budge on any of it. And I think, like, so not only does that give people jobs, but it also shows you that we can do it without anybody else. So yeah, go ahead.
So I love that. I'm gonna Marsha, I'm gonna give you your turn to speak. In the next question, the next iteration of this question I'm gonna ask is, what do you say then to the white community that feels that we are pushing against them? So Marsha, bring that in, and then we'll continue on.
Pushing against them how?
Basically,
like we're pushing them out.
Exactly.
Well, it's just not true. Like, I don't, I mean, yeah, it's like, sorry, but like, when this was like maybe 2 years ago, I think we're on our third report. So this is just circling back a little bit to the last question. Some of the things that I like from the I haven't been working. The truth is, I actually have only been working for about, like, I wrote my first produced script in 2015. So I haven't been like working for 20 years. And so when I was coming in, I was very aware, like, I was like, when I worked in TV, it's like the only other people of color on set was like the people who worked in the craft truck. Like, that was it. Maybe one camera guy. Like, that was it. So I was very aware. And so when I started out and I didn't feel that I had a lot of power, I would fight for stories in the room. I would fight to make sure we weren't, it's like, oh, this absentee black father. No, that's like not okay. Like, long before. And I didn't win all the time. Sometimes it went, but at least I felt like I like stood up for us, and that was why I was there. I ran for council, for the WGC council, because there were no people of color on council, and never had been, and I was elected. So now I'm in my second term. I think in my second term, my fourth year. I'm the chair of the diversity committee. I'm working with the other unions trying to make change. I'm mentoring all the time if I can. I really am trying to bring people up. And one thing that I used to do before is I used to go and I would always try and find out who all the actors of color were. And I would go to plays and watch, so that way when I was in the room and people would talk about casting and they'd be like, we don't know anybody, I'd be like, oh, I saw this person in this show or in this thing. And so that I would know, I would be armed with the information to know. And so, I guess, look, I'm not disagreeing at all with the idea of doing things for ourselves and helping people. And I certainly do try and use the power I have now in any way that I can. But yeah, I don't know. I do think I feel like it's a bit of both. Oh, sorry, this is not your question. Your question is the idea that we're pushing people out. That's your question. Yes. So I think 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we at the diversity committee of the WGC asked for them to do a report of what was the representation of writers of color in rooms, because every single writer, a lot of like white male writers were like, I can't get a job. And that's what their people are telling them. You're not getting the job because you're a white man, and they don't want to hire white men. And people would say it to my face, and I would be like, oh, that's weird, because every room I'm in, there's always several white men. So I don't know. I think they took your job. Like, what do you want me to say? So anyways, we did this report, and like, sure enough, it was like that people are getting hired in the very like lowest level positions, often not getting scripts. So we would find out what was their job position, what script they would get. And then, yeah, and see, it's like, but the executive producers and the showrunners, it's not changing that. So I mean, I have, you know, my facts to back it up, and I have my lived experience to back it up. But it's like anybody who wants to say that, it's like, I don't have time to like entertain that fantasy that I know isn't true. So it's like, whatever. It's like, that's your way to be like, that's why I don't get jobs, or that's why I can't do anything. And if that's the excuse that makes you feel good, go for it. But it was like back in the day when there was nobody, I wasn't going to be like, well, I'm Black and I can't get a job. No, I tried to get a job. I went out there. I trained myself more. I went to school. I did everything I could to work. It's like, we always knew we had to work 2 times harder or whatever it was. So it's like, well, even if that was your reality now, okay, like, then work harder. Like, it's like, that's what everybody else has been doing. So that's what I say.
Back in the day, we weren't even allowed in the room. And I think that's also some of the scary parts, that all of a sudden it's so changed. The landscape has changed so much because we're allowed in the room. We weren't allowed in the room, right? Never mind if we got the job, we weren't even allowed to interview for the job. That's what we've changed. I don't think any of us want to get a job because of tokenism. Okay. I want to get the job because I'm the best one for the job.
Like, oh shit, things are equal now. Like, oh,
yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
no. What are we doing? And they're not even, right? But they're like, oh shit.
yeah, wait, they're at the same level.
Yeah, right.
They got an education and everything, you know, like, it's like, I just want to be in the room. And that's what's freaking people out. But like, nobody of color, you know, and it's the same thing for the Me Too movement. No woman, nobody wants to get a job or a position because it's token, because it's a tokenism, and it's because it doesn't look good on the, you know,
Right.
the company website if they're not diverse. I want it because I'm good.
Right.
You know, we all come in prepared. We just wanted to get in the room. That's what we wanted. That's what this was about, you know?
I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting because when we are given jobs, you know, a lot of people call it tokenism because we're the 1 or the 2 in the room. And when someone from the white community is given a job that, you know, by her sister, uncle, brother, mother, nobody says anything. And they're not perhaps as qualified as someone from either the Black community, the Indigenous community, or the people of color communities. Patricia, I'm going to give you a little bit more to speak. We have about 15 minutes, and then I want to finish off with the one big question of the night.
Yes, I hear everything you're saying, and I acknowledge there has been a lot of discrimination, but something I have always believed since the moment I was a teenager entering the industry is that when you bring value, you will always get work. You will always be in those conversations. And as a woman of color, I started my career in the mid-90s, and I have truly felt that because I speak 3 languages and I bring a lot of value. And back in the day, I trained myself to know how to edit, how to do camera, to be experienced in every single aspect of the industry. And I could have those conversations. That was really the way I was always in a room on a TV show or a project, and never wait for other people to call you or give you work. So that's really how everybody here has spoken about. Always, there was no margin for error for people of color. So my advice to the newer generation is always come with the mindset, come in with value, with what can you offer? What can you bring that's better than anything else? How can you be prepared? How can you be aware, educated in every aspect that makes you an expert in a field or another? So that way, it's inevitable. You will always be considered for the positions or the work or even the funding. So that I come from that perspective because it has been my reality. There is a lot of things that tokenism and all of that. I completely acknowledge that. Maybe just having that switch in your mindset and believing in yourself could make you advance faster.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So we have a few minutes left. Last question of the night. If there was only one thing that you hope the audience takes away from our conversation today, what would it be? And I'll start with Roderick, then we'll go to Patricia, Marsha, and Mariah.
Thank you. One thing. I hope that I'm probably going to say like 5 things, but I'm going to tie it into one, I promise. So I hope that like you get from what I told you about even like my little short and whatever, and the other things that you got from these queens around me, that like you don't need, I don't mean this to sound like divisive or like this or, whatever else, but like we don't need them or anyone else. Like we are all there. There are so many talented Black and brown beings in Canada and in the US. There are so many who aren't getting opportunities. Our parents have always told us, right, that we have to be 100 times better than them just to get half as much, and that's true, and we are. So just make sure that you demand that level of excellence from everything that we do. Remember that we don't get the same opportunities that they do. So when you put out something, make sure that it's excellent. And there's nothing that you can't do with your own people. And when you do that with your own people, then bring them up. And help from everyone is fine. We are an inclusive people by nature. We've had to be. So like that, you can't call me racist. You can't say I'm pushing you out. That's bull. That's not true. It's just not. So just remember that we are more than enough, in that demand excellence from yourself and all of your Black and brown peers around you, and that once you show that we can do that with and without them, and that our numbers are higher than everything else, I promise you everything else will come around. Look at Jordan Peele, and look at Shaka, and look at the Denzels, and look at John Boyegas, and look at all of these people. They're all doing it, because we are more than enough. So remember that, and believe in that, and just demand excellence, nothing short. Don't worry about what they're doing. It's about what we're doing, and that's all that matters. So I hope that you took that at the very least from my little piece. Thank you.
Marsha?
Oh, I thought Patricia was going.
Doing that. I'm going by what's on my screen.
Right. Okay. I guess the one thing I want to say, the one thing I want people to take away is that representation does matter. And, there are going to be people out there who say it doesn't, and whatever. And it's like, don't get caught up in that. Like, it matters. We know it matters. And now we just need to be like, rather than wasting our time and energy arguing about what's true and what isn't, we can put that time and energy into making it happen. And I agree with what Roderick said. I agree with what Patricia said. It really rolls off my back when people say like, oh, you got that job because you're this, or, or whatever it may be, because I know how hard I've worked to get where I am. And I know that when I go in that room, I am going to deliver. So people can think whatever they want to think about how I got there. And even if that is, though, it doesn't matter. It's like, I go in with the mindset that I'm going to do excellent work. It's how I was raised. It's how I got here. And then I deliver. And I do think that what we've done here today, it's like, that is the representation that people want to see. Us being here is what people want to see. And I will also just finally say that the most change I have seen, actually, I will say, has come from individuals. people like us, or even people like white people who are like allies or friends or whatever, who are really committed to change. And they go and they use that power to make sure that the room is diverse, to make sure that on set there is a person of color in every department, to take care of the people who are there. We did it on The Porter. We were the creative force, but we worked with other people and everybody believed in the importance of that. And that's how it changed. And it didn't have anything to do with any mandates or anything. We did it because we cared. So getting into those spaces and caring and inspiring other people really can make a big difference.
Patricia, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yes, I strongly believe diversity is empowering, because when you have in the room, in a team of collaborators, people who have different life experiences, expertises, and perspectives, it strengthens the content and the team. So see it more as something of value, something that you must have and not reject. So that value that diversity voices bring to a story is really the key to be successful. And for content creators, my advice would be always keep in mind the audience. Who are you speaking to? Who are those people you can inspire and empower to think differently, to have a different perspective or opinion on a subject matter? Because truly we are making content to be watched. And I come from that school of it doesn't matter how much content we produce, as long as people watch it and people can feel the transformation in society and in conversations based on what they consume. So to keep that in mind is truly the key for me to make the industry a sustainable, diverse ecosystem.
I would say what I hope the audience gets is, first of all, everybody's points, because they're all super valid and super important. And it is what it is. We don't exist without these points of views. And there is not one thing to take away from it. It's all of it. That's kind of the point. I guess my global thought process for the audience would be, one is to know that there are so many people working so hard to try and make a change, be it for their own personal art, be it for the rooms that we walk into that, used to be scary and triggering, that are hopefully no longer, be it, to try and change the mindsets of the people with money who are tight-lipped and keeping it close, whatever it is. There are so many people who are putting the right foot forward. And I want that to be clear, because, or else we would still be where we were, 30 years ago in this business, which was even scarier and sadder than it is today. But there is a lot more work to be done. And instead of that being a negative, like, I was saying some negative things about what's happening in the Quebec industry. That's not because the Quebec industry is horrible. There's beautiful art being created in Quebec. There's beautiful creators and writers and producers, and there's many, many people of color that are creating here. But it doesn't, to say that there needs to be more change doesn't have to be a negative, but it does have to be acknowledged. So I just want people to be, stop being uncomfortable and fearful of needing to do more, and start, pulling up their big boy and big girl pants and getting the work done, because we deserve it. We deserve our space here. We deserve this industry. We have proven that we have the talent and the capacity and the creation and the excellence for it. So, stop cop-washing it and just, let's go. Let's move forward. Let's create more. Come on. That's
well said. Well said. Thank you all so much. Mariah, thank you. Marsha, Roderick, Patricia, thank you for such real talk, honest talk, and for sharing your truths with us today.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah. Nice
Everyone
to meet
enjoy
you
the
all.
festival.
Thanks for having us.